I really needed that interview to go smoothly. Not because I was in full-blown panic mode, at least not yet, but because for the first time in a long while, I was finally starting to drag myself out of the pit burnout had dumped me into a year back. That hole had been deep. At the time, I was holed up in a small one-bedroom apartment down in Carver, Indiana, trying to piece my life back together after a long spell of being jobless. I'd walked away from my old insurance claims gig after it absolutely chewed me up and spat me out. Burnout had cooked me. Since then, I'd been stringing together whatever odd jobs I could find just to keep the lights on and stay afloat. But this new job? It had real promise. It was with a logistics company up in Fairmont, about a 3-hour drive north. Not flashy by any stretch, but it was steady work, came with benefits, and offered something I hadn't had in a while: structure. If I landed it, I could finally breathe again. The interview was locked in for 9 a.m. sharp that Wednesday. I didn't want to roll the dice with traffic or risk showing up looking like I'd just dragged myself out of bed at 4 in the morning. So I figured I'd play it safe, drive up the evening before and crash at an Airbnb nearby. I ended up booking a place that seemed just right. It was a single-story house tucked in a quiet neighborhood, about 20 minutes from the company's building. The listing described it as a private room with full access to the kitchen and all the usual stuff: calm, professional atmosphere, perfect for travelers. The reviews were solid, the host's name was Tessa, and there were plenty of pictures showing a clean, cozy space. Everything looked good, so I booked it. I packed a small overnight bag and hit the road around 4 o'clock that afternoon, rolling into the neighborhood just after 7 o'clock. The sun was dipping low, casting this warm, golden light across the houses as I pulled up. The area was your classic quiet suburb, rows of similar homes, trimmed lawns, 2-car driveways. Pretty much your standard slice of middle America. The house was modest, white siding with some brick, blue shutters, and a clean, paved driveway. I double-checked the address, 3719 Brookpine Lane. Looked right. I parked, grabbed my bag, and made my way to the front door. It was unlocked. Weird, sure, but not unheard of. Some hosts leave the door open for contactless check-in. I stepped inside and called out a quick hello, just in case. No response. The place smelled faintly of lemony cleaner, and it looked neat, clearly lived in, but not messy. I took a few more steps in, planning to shoot Tessa a quick message letting them know I'd arrived. That's when I heard a voice behind me. "Hi there!" I just about jumped out of my skin. A woman came around the corner, maybe mid-40s, brown hair going gray at the roots, loose sweatshirt, and tired-looking eyes. She looked just as surprised to see me as I was to see her. "Didn't mean to startle you," she said with a quick smile. "I'm Brenna. I'm staying here too, in the back room." I blinked, confused. "Oh, I didn't realize this was a shared rental." "Oh yeah," she said, waving vaguely down the hallway. "It's split. You've got the front room, I've got the back. Tessa mentioned someone else was coming in tonight. I just figured I'd say hi so it's not awkward later, you know." I forced a polite nod. "Right. Makes sense. I'm Logan. Nice to meet you." She kept smiling, maybe a beat longer than normal, then nodded and turned back down the hall. "I'll let you get settled." As soon as she disappeared, I pulled out my phone and opened the Airbnb app. Something didn't add up. Nowhere in the listing did it say anything about sharing the space with another guest. It said private room, period. I combed through every detail again, even zoomed in on the photos. Only one bedroom shown. Every review praised how peaceful and quiet the place was. Not a single mention of it being shared. Frowning, I messaged Tessa, "Hey, just checked in. There's a woman here who says she's staying in the back room too. Just wanted to confirm." No reply right away. I decided to let it go for now and carried my bag to the room. The bedroom looked fine. Clean sheets, a lamp on the nightstand, small desk tucked in the corner. Nothing fancy, but no red flags either. I was starving, so I pulled out the sandwich and fruit I'd packed earlier and headed to the kitchen to eat. I hadn't even been in there a full minute before Brenna showed up again, barefoot, holding a mug of tea. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. I gave her a tired smile. "Just grabbing a bite." She leaned casually against the counter, sipping her tea. "You here for work?" "Job interview tomorrow," I answered, keeping it short. Her face lit up. "Really? What kind?" "Operations coordinator," I said. "At a logistics place in Fairmont." "That's great," she said, eyes studying me. "You look young. How old are you?" 24. She raised an eyebrow and smiled. "Still got your whole life ahead of you." I nodded, hoping that was the end of it. But then she kept going. "Mind if I ask you something?" I paused mid-bite. "Sure. You're single, right?" That one caught me off guard. Yeah, I guess." She smiled again, but this time it didn't quite reach her eyes. "That's rare these days. Guys your age, most of them are just after whatever, you know." "Yeah, I guess," I said awkwardly. She took a small step closer. "My room's in the back, like I said. Got a television and some wine if you want to chill for a bit. Might help take your mind off the interview." I gave a nervous chuckle, trying to stay friendly. "Thanks, but I'm wiped. Just gonna eat and crash." Her smile froze for a second. Then it faded slowly. "Oh, all right." She stood there for another second or two, then quietly walked off. I let out a long breath, looked down at my sandwich, and just like that, my appetite was gone. That's when my phone buzzed. It was from Tessa. "There shouldn't be anyone else in the house. Asterisk. Please leave the house immediately and call the police. I'm reporting this to Airbnb right now." Asterisk. That message hit like ice water. My whole body went cold. I turned my head toward the hallway where Brenna had disappeared just moments earlier. And that's when I heard it, a creaking sound from somewhere deeper inside the house. Then the slow squeak of a door swinging open. Then footsteps. Heavy ones. Fast. Coming right at me. I didn't wait around to find out who or what was coming. I dropped the rest of my food right there on the table, grabbed my bag in one frantic motion, and bolted. The front door burst open as I charged out, hitting the steps at a sprint and nearly tripping over my own feet. I dove into my car, slammed the door shut, and yanked the gear into reverse without even checking my mirrors. That's when I saw him. A man, bigger than me, came racing around the corner of the house. He was charging full speed toward the driveway. I floored it. Tires screeched as I backed out and tore down the street, hands trembling, heart trying to punch its way out of my chest. I didn't even look back. I drove until I found a gas station off the highway, lit up under those harsh white fluorescent lights. Only then, parked under that buzzing sign, did I finally start to breathe again. I called the police first, then rang Airbnb a second time. An officer met me at the station shortly after. I gave him the full story, every creepy detail, while trying to keep my voice steady. He nodded the whole time, told me they'd send someone out to the property right away. Tessa, the host, got back to me soon after. They sounded completely shocked and genuinely sorry. According to them, that house had been empty for weeks. It had been professionally cleaned, the doors locked, and no guests scheduled until me. No one should have been there. No one had the keys. I never found out who Brenna really was. Or who that man was, who came thundering down that hallway like he had every intention of catching me before I left. The police later told me there were signs of a forced entry, side window pried open. Airbnb refunded the full stay without hesitation. That night, I ended up parked at a 24-hour diner, half asleep in the front seat of my car, nerves fried and body aching. I was too wired to relax and too scared to sleep. Still, the next morning, I cleaned myself up the best I could in a diner bathroom, threw on my wrinkled dress shirt, and drove to the interview like nothing had happened. Somehow, despite everything, I nailed it. Got the job. Smiled, shook hands, and kept my mouth shut about how I'd spent the night literally running for my life. But I'll never forget that house, 3719 Brookpine Lane. Or the way Brenna had smiled at me, Her expression too wide, her eyes too dark, like the smile didn't belong to her at all. These days, when work takes me out of town and I have to book a place for the night, I'm not so carefree. I double-check every door, test every lock, pull open every closet. And sometimes, just for a second, I stop and listen for footsteps that should not be there. A change of scene. Truth be told, I did not even want to go to the wedding. It wasn't that I had anything against Hannah. She was a good soul, someone I'd known from college, but we hadn't spoken in years. Getting an out-of-the-blue invite to a small-town wedding after nearly 7 years of silence? It felt strange. Like I was walking into a movie I hadn't seen the beginning of. Nolan, one of my closest friends, talked me into it. Dude, come on, it's a weekend in the country, free food, plenty of wine. We'll make it a road trip. It'll be good for you. And maybe he was right. I'd been pushing myself hard at the firm, drowning in late nights and early mornings. I hadn't left Minneapolis in months. A break sounded better than I wanted to admit. So we packed up Nolan's silver Honda Civic and hit the road that Friday morning. Crossed 3 states with the music cranked up and the windows down. We argued about whether Iowa or Nebraska had the most soul-crushing scenery and laughed way more than I had in weeks. By the time we rolled into Pine Hollow, Wyoming, the sun was hanging low in the sky. The town looked like something out of a faded postcard, like time had left it untouched since the 1970s. One gas station, a single diner, a dusty bar, and clusters of worn houses surrounded by endless farmland. Hannah's family had roots there going back generations. Our Airbnb, which I'd booked without expecting much, turned out to be a nice surprise. It was an old farmhouse, 2 bedrooms, wood-paneled walls, and a kitchen that smelled faintly of cinnamon. The place had some age on it, sure, but it was clean and had that kind of rustic charm that grows on you. What really stood out, though, was how far out it was, about 6 miles down a dirt road, way off the grid. Surrounded by tall grass, patches of woods, and absolutely nothing else. No neighbors. No lights. No sound. Nolan was all in. Bro, he said, stepping out into the dusk. This is the kind of place you could just vanish in. I laughed at the time. Wish I hadn't. We unpacked, ordered the only pizza in town that delivered, and stayed up late swapping stories and laughing until close to midnight. Nolan passed out the second his head hit the pillow. Me? I couldn't sleep. It wasn't the age of the house that bothered me. I like old places. It was the silence. Out there, with no cars, no distant city hum, no pipes groaning or heaters ticking on, it felt too still. Like the whole place was holding its breath. And when you've spent your life surrounded by noise, silence starts to sound like it's watching you. Eventually, I drifted off. The wedding day. Saturday came, and the wedding was actually beautiful. A sweet little ceremony held at an outdoor chapel right near the tree line. Hannah looked stunning, and her family welcomed us like we were long-lost cousins. Even if I still felt a bit like an outsider. The reception ended up being a blast. Good food, better wine, dancing under strings of lights that swayed in the breeze. Nolan and I didn't head back to the house until after 10. Both buzzing with that happy, tipsy glow. He went straight to bed. I stayed up a little while longer, wanting to wind down. I turned on a lamp in the living room, settled into the old recliner, and scrolled through my phone for a bit. That's when I heard it. A knock. Soft. Just one. Deliberate. I froze, phone still in hand. My head turned toward the front door. Way out here? At that hour? Way out here? I got up slowly and made my way to the front door, every step tight with unease. I leaned in and peeked through the peephole. Nothing. Just stillness. Still, something felt off. I unlatched the lock and eased the door open a few inches, poking my head out into the night. It was pitch black, no movement, no headlights, no figures walking off into the distance. The porch light cast a weak glow across the gravel drive, and even that didn't reach far. The driveway was empty. So was everything else. I stepped out onto the porch, glanced left then right, just swaying trees and restless shadows stirred by the wind. No animals, no people, no cars. I closed the door again, locked it, and stood there for a second, listening hard. Nothing. Dead quiet. Maybe the place creaked. Maybe some critter had bumped the door. My brain scrambled to explain it away, but something about that single, slow knock, it just didn't sit right. It was too exact. Too intentional. I went back to the recliner but kept my phone in hand this time, eyes fixed on the front window. I didn't scroll. I didn't relax. I just stared and waited. Then it happened again. A knock. But this time, it came from the back of the house. I jumped up so fast the recliner snapped upright with a loud thunk. My feet hit the floor and I rushed toward the kitchen, flipping on the rear porch light as I reached the window. Nothing. The backyard stretched out behind the house, wide and sloped, leading into a thick line of trees. A whole lot of darkness. I scanned the yard for any sign of movement, stood there for what felt like 10 minutes. Still nothing. But that knock had been deliberate. Not the kind of thing the wind could do. And out here? This far from town? No one should be wandering around unless they had a reason. And we sure as hell hadn't told anyone where we were staying. Even if they were local, nobody would come this deep onto private property at night. Not unless they meant to. Eventually, my heart slowed. I tried convincing myself it had all been in my head. Just a rough night, nerves messing with me. I headed to my room, crawled under the covers, and stared up at the ceiling in the quiet. Somehow, eventually, I drifted off. What woke me next was another knock. But this one didn't come from outside. It came from my bedroom door. I sat straight up, lungs frozen mid-breath. My eyes locked on the door across the room. I was about to speak when I heard it. "Tessa, you awake?" It was Nolan. I got up and opened the door. He stood there barefoot in the hallway, his face pale, hair messy, eyes wide with fear. "There's someone outside," he whispered. "What?" He pointed back toward his bedroom. "Out past my window." I heard footsteps. I looked out. There was a guy, walking around the house. Like he was looking for something. My stomach turned. "Did he see you?" "I don't think so." Before either of us could say another word, we heard it. A sharp metallic click from the front of the house. The doorknob. Nolan and I turned toward the living room like a pair of statues suddenly brought to life. We moved quietly, carefully, just enough to peek around the corner toward the front door. The porch light was still on. And someone was standing there. A man. Looked mid-40s. Messy hair, long brown coat, face shadowed just enough to be hard to make out. But through the window, I could see it. He was holding something. A thin piece of metal. He was trying to pick the lock. I grabbed Nolan by the arm. "Call the cops. Now." He took off down the hallway, phone already in hand. I crept closer, stopping a few feet from the door, my hand instinctively resting on the deadbolt like that would somehow hold back whoever was on the other side. The man jiggled the handle. Then paused. He didn't knock. Didn't speak. He just stood there. Like he knew I was on the other side of that door. Like he was waiting. Then, without warning, he turned and bolted. But not away. He ran around the side of the house. I didn't chase him. Nolan didn't either. Instead, we locked ourselves in the master bedroom, pushed the dresser against the door, and waited. We didn't speak much, just listened. It took nearly 40 minutes for the police to arrive. By then, the guy was long gone. No tire tracks. No footprints. No signs of a vehicle. Just an open barn door out back we hadn't noticed before and a whole lot of dark. The cops were nice enough, but they couldn't do much. Took our statements, looked around, and suggested maybe it was just a local who got confused about the property. Yeah. Right. We didn't buy it. Not for a second. We packed up the next morning. No brunch. No goodbyes. We were gone before the sun was fully up. To this day, I have no idea who that man was. But one thing I do know. He had been out there long before we caught on. He might have been watching us when we showed up. Maybe tested the doors. Waited for the lights to go out. Maybe he knew exactly who was inside. The beginning of another escape. I can still picture the exact moment we knew we needed out. It was a Thursday evening in early October. The sky outside our Philadelphia apartment stained that deep bruised purple that always comes with the end of a long, gray day. I was hunched over my laptop at the kitchen table, grinding through a backlog of emails that had piled up like wet laundry. Across from me, Sophie, my girlfriend of 3 years, sat in silence, nursing her third glass of wine like it was her only friend. She didn't have to say anything. I could read the exhaustion in her face better than any words. We were burned out. Both of us. Completely spent. Sophie had been pulling double shifts at Mass General as a cardiac nurse, and I was fresh off a brutal series of software deployment deadlines at the tech firm. Our days were just a blur of caffeine, computer screens, and crashing into bed sometime after midnight. Weekends didn't feel like relief anymore. Just leftovers. A brunch here. A silent movie night there. The occasional argument that ended in half-hearted apologies and deeper fatigue. It wasn't that we had fallen out of love. We were just worn down to the bone. So when Sophie finally looked up from her wine and said, "Let's get out of here. Just disappear for a while," I didn't argue. I closed the laptop right then and nodded. That night, wrapped in a blanket on the couch, she pulled out her iPad, and we started scrolling through listings. And that's when we found it. We found the place on a Sunday night, an A-frame cottage listed on Airbnb, tucked away in some remote patch of Maine called Norcross. The photos made it look like something off a postcard. Snow resting lightly on the roof, the tall pines crowding around it like quiet sentries, and a frozen lake stretching out just behind it, glimmering under a pale sky. The host's name was Rachel. Her reviews read like love letters. Peaceful. Restorative. Total seclusion. Just what the soul needs, one person had written. Another said it saved their marriage. It was affordable, too, and more than anything, it was far, far away from everything. We booked it right then and there. 5 nights, starting Monday. The confirmation landed in my inbox before I could even shut the lid on the laptop. That was the first time in a while I saw Sophie smile without forcing it. A real one. There was something behind her eyes again. Maybe not happiness, but at least a flicker of light. Hope. Rachel messaged us not long after. Her tone was warm, easy, said she'd make sure the firewood was stacked and the cabin preheated before we arrived. She even promised to leave the lockbox code on the morning of our check-in, tucked in a message with directions. Everything about it just felt simple, safe, comforting. The next few days were a blur. Packing, running last-minute errands, imagining slow mornings by the lake with coffee and stillness. Sophie picked up an old film camera. "For the vibe," she'd said with a little laugh. I loaded up on paper trail maps and local guidebooks. We hadn't done a trip like this in years. For once, we felt synced again. Like we were actually moving in the same direction. But now, looking back, I can see where the cracks started. The first weird moment came Sunday night. We were mapping out the route when I realized something. The lockbox code Rachel promised hadn't come. No message, no update. I figured it was just late. People get busy. I shot her a quick note anyway, just a little check-in. No reply. By the time I went to bed, I still hadn't heard anything. Sophie said not to worry. "She's probably just getting things ready," she said, flicking through those glowing reviews again. "Everybody says she's great." And they did. Not one mention of flakiness. No red flags. Just peace, quiet, and glowing praise. Still, something in my gut didn't sit right. It was like a low, steady hum under my skin. No real reason for it, just a feeling I couldn't shake. But the next morning, we left anyway. No response from Rachel. No code. But we got in the car and drove into Maine like we had blinders on. Maybe we were just desperate to get away. The road into Norcross twisted through the hills like a thread. Barely another car in sight. Snow started falling halfway through the drive, flurries drifting across the windshield in that dreamy, slow-motion way that only happens up north. The sky had that gray tint, the kind that makes it feel like dusk even before noon. The town itself wasn't much: one lonely gas station, a tiny post office, and a diner that looked like it hadn't seen a remodel since disco was popular. The deeper we drove, the more the rest of the world seemed to disappear behind us. When we finally turned onto the private road Rachel had listed in her directions, Sophie had gone silent. She hadn't said much since we passed the dead-end sign about 2 miles back. We climbed a small hill, and there it was. The cottage. Just like the pictures. Maybe even better. It sat nestled in a clearing, framed by trees and snow. The chimney was puffing thin trails of smoke into the cold air. The porch steps were dusted lightly, like a greeting card. The lake behind it shimmered under the cloudy sky, frozen solid. But something wasn't right. Parked off to the side was a black SUV, half buried under snow like it hadn't been touched in days. The porch light was off. The windows were dark. No tire tracks. No footprints. No sign that anyone had been there recently. Still no message from Rachel. Sophie stood beside me, gripping the sleeves of her coat like she was holding herself together. "Should we knock? What if she's not here?" We walked up the porch steps slowly, unsure. There was a lockbox right next to the door. No note. No code. I called the number listed on Rachel's profile. It rang twice, then cut to voicemail. Sophie was starting to look like she couldn't catch her breath. Her words were shallow clouds in the freezing air. I tried the doorknob. It turned. Unlocked. We stepped inside, and the cold hit us first. The kind of cold that tells you no one's been around in a while. Then came the smell, old wood smoke with something sour underneath. Not rotten. Just off. Like a room that had been sealed shut for too long. The cabin itself looked lived in, but not recently. Firewood was stacked neatly near the blackened hearth. Furniture was mismatched but charming. A dusty shelf full of worn paperbacks lined one wall. Upstairs, the bed was made with a faded quilt, but one of the pillows looked like it had been tossed in a hurry. On the counter sat a mug, still half full of something. "Maybe she left in a rush?" I offered, even though I didn't believe it. Sophie didn't answer. She was staring at the floor. There were small wet spots leading from the door deeper inside. Like snow had melted off boots. But we hadn't made those. We just stepped in. The door had been shut tight. That night was when it started. The knocking. It was faint. Like something soft tapping from inside the walls. Not loud. Just enough to prick at your senses. I sat up in bed and listened. One tap. Then another. Then nothing. I turned to Sophie. She was already staring at the ceiling. "You heard that too?" I whispered. She nodded, eyes wide. "It's been happening since around 2. Every few minutes. Different spots." I wanted to reason it away. Old cabins shift and settle. Animals nest in the walls. Wood creaks when it gets cold. But this didn't sound like any of that. This sounded intentional. Outside, the snow had started falling again, soft flakes drifting down in slow, lazy spirals. Not a single car passed. No sirens, no voices, no heavy boots stomping overhead. Just stillness. A kind of peace we hadn't felt in months. That night, we slept better than we had in weeks. When morning came, I woke before Jenna made a fresh pot of coffee and stepped out onto the back deck. The world was hushed. Pine trees surrounded the house like sentinels, tall and unmoving, wrapped in white. I stood there with my mug, listening to the wind push through the branches. Every so often, I heard a creak, snow shifting or limbs adjusting, but that was it. For a moment, I considered not going back inside at all. Jenna eventually came down the stairs, her face softer than it had been in a while, eyes less clouded. She looked rested. But then she stopped in the middle of the living room and wrinkled her nose. "Do you smell that?" she asked. I took a whiff. At first, nothing. Then it hit, faint and sharp, like antiseptic or those slick wet floor cleaners they use in hospitals. "Maybe the cleaning crew was just overly thorough," I said with a half-hearted chuckle. "Probably gave it a scrub before we showed up." She gave a small shrug and went to start breakfast. But as the day wore on, that smell never really went away. If anything, it got worse. It came and went, lingering for a while, fading, then suddenly drifting in heavy like it was coming from inside the walls. We checked everything we could think of. The fridge, the trash, the sinks, even under the bed. Everything was spotless. Too spotless. "This house is too clean," Jenna muttered at one point, laughing uneasily. "Like creepily clean." That night, we curled up in the den to watch a movie. Halfway through, I caught it again. That smell, sharp and clinical, like disinfectant mixed with something sour. I paused the film and stood up, squinting toward the hallway. "Jenna," I said, "do you smell it again?" She nodded slowly. Her brow was tight, eyes narrowing like she was focusing on something distant. "It's stronger now." We started following it. Step by step, nose to the air like we were tracking a gas leak. Eventually, we traced it to a linen closet just between the master bedroom and the bathroom. I opened the door. Neatly folded towels and bedding stared back at us. Everything looked fine. But the smell was thickest here. I pushed aside the bottom shelf and tapped the back wall. It sounded hollow. Jenna gave me a wary look. "It's just a closet." "I dunno," I muttered. "Let me check something." I went to my bag, grabbed my flashlight, and crouched down to get a closer look. In the far corner, near the floor, I saw them, hairline cracks running through the paint, barely noticeable unless you were looking for them. And right at the base was a small metal latch, half covered in paint, almost hidden. "Jenna," I called. "There's something here." She leaned closer. "What is that?" "I think it's the door." Neither of us moved. The air around us felt heavier somehow, like the house itself was holding its breath. I looked at her. "You want me to open it?" She swallowed. "Just see what's inside. But be careful." I scraped away the paint, feeling the latch give slightly. Then I gave it a gentle pull. Click. The panel popped open just an inch, but enough for the chemical stench to come rushing out like a slap. My eyes started watering. I opened it the rest of the way. Behind it was a narrow crawl space. The walls were raw wood. No insulation. The ceiling barely high enough to crouch under. Cold air pressed in from all sides. My flashlight beam caught paint cans, a few old rags, and something under a blue tarp in the back corner. "There's something here," I said. "Don't," Jenna whispered behind me. "Please don't go in." But I did. I moved slowly, hands and knees pressed against the creaking boards. Every breath felt tight. When I reached the tarp, I pulled it back, and instantly wished I hadn't. Underneath was a mess of broken furniture, splintered chair legs, torn cushions, a dented lamp missing its base. Pieces of a life, smashed and forgotten. But on top of the pile sat something else. A notebook. Small, leather-bound, warped from moisture. I snatched it and crawled out fast, coughing and blinking as the air burned my nose. Back in the living room, I set it down on the coffee table. Most of the pages were ruined. Water damage had eaten away the ink. But a few entries remained. The handwriting was shaky, erratic, like someone had been scribbling through panic. A name sat at the top. Harlan J. Knox. January 2018. We started reading. January 14th. Asterisk, I don't sleep anymore. The smell won't go. It's in the vents, in the walls. I told the property manager. He smiled. Said I was just adjusting. Adjusting to what? Asterisk. January 17th. Asterisk, the dreams are the worst. Always a woman crying. Same every time. She's here, in the walls. Screaming. but no one hears. I tried to pull up the floorboards. There's something under them. I know it. Asterisk. January 22 ND. Asterisk, I can't stay here. The smell is stronger. It's like it's trying to remind me. I think someone died here. I think, asterisk. The last sentence trailed off. Words scribbled over and over until the pen ripped through the page. We stared at each other. Jenna's face was pale, her voice small. This wasn't in the listing, she said. No, I replied. This is something they didn't want anyone to find. We packed first thing in the morning. I wanted to leave that night, but Jenna was too shaken, and outside, the snow was coming down hard. Thick and fast. We barely slept. Every sound in the house seemed too loud, too sharp. Like the walls were breathing. Somewhere around midnight, we both shot up in bed at the exact same time. A thud. Then, a dragging sound. Heavy. Slow. Moving through the hallway. We didn't speak. We lay there, fully dressed, blankets forgotten, eyes locked on the ceiling. Around 2 a.m., it came again. A single, deliberate thud. Then that slow, scraping drag across the wood floor, growing closer. I reached for the flashlight. Dead. The batteries were gone. Jenna, I whispered. Stay here. No, she said, grabbing my arm tight. We go together. The sound had stopped. I stepped into the hallway. The air was cold, asterisk colder asterisk than it had been all day. Our breath floated in the dark, thick clouds in the frozen stillness. I scanned the hallway with the dim glow of my phone screen, not sure what I expected, honestly, hoping for nothing. But the linen closet door? Wide open. Jenna and I had both seen it shut before we went to bed. Now it stood there, like someone had been rummaging through it. I stepped toward it slowly, Jenna a few steps behind me. The crawlspace panel inside, the one I had opened the night before, was now sealed shut again. Firm. Flush. I hadn't closed it. Jenna, I whispered, eyes locked on that back wall. We need to go. Right now. She didn't argue. 10 minutes later, we were tossing our bags into the car, no words, no hesitation. Just motion. Survival instinct had taken over. We didn't even bother folding clothes or checking drawers. As we pulled out of the driveway, I glanced back just once. The window above the porch stared back, dark, empty. But I swear to this day, it felt like something was behind it. Watching. We didn't stop driving until the outskirts of Cleveland were in sight. It was just past dawn when we finally pulled into a rest stop off the highway. We sat there for a long time, wrapped in silence, the car engine ticking quietly as it cooled. Eventually, Jenna spoke, her voice hoarse. You think that guy from the journal, you think he... She trailed off. I looked down at my hands. I don't know, I said softly. But I don't think he got out. We reported everything to Airbnb. The hidden crawlspace. The chemical smell. The notebook with Harlan Knox's name scribbled inside. We sent photos, even a few audio clips from the Knox I had started recording out of desperation. A week later, someone from Airbnb's safety division called. They sounded professional. Apologetic. Told us the listing had been removed, and that the property owner was under investigation for policy violations. That was the last we heard from them. Weeks passed. Then months. We tried to move on, but some things hang in the air long after you leave a place. Heavy. Lingering. Jenna started sleeping with a small light on in the bedroom, no matter where we were. I caught myself opening closet doors and checking behind curtains out of habit, like I was still expecting to find another hidden latch. Then one night, curiosity got the best of me. I opened my laptop and typed in the address of that house. Nothing. The listing was gone, sure, but there weren't even property records. No real estate history. No news articles. It was as if the house had been plucked clean off the grid. I sent another email to Airbnb, asking if they had any follow-up on the investigation. Their reply came 2 days later. Thank you for reaching out. This matter has been reviewed and is considered resolved. No further action is required. That was it. No details. No explanation. Just a clean dismissal, like they'd swept the entire thing under the rug. And even now, years later, I still catch whiffs of that smell. It sneaks up on me in hotel lobbies, in hospital corridors, sometimes even in my own hallway after a deep clean. Sterile. Cold. Clinical. It hits me, and I remember, not the sounds, not even the notebook, but the feeling. That feeling that something was still back there. Behind that wall. Waiting. No amount of bleach or drywall could erase what had soaked into that place. And the worst part? Someone's probably staying there now. Right this second. Thinking they found a quiet little escape. A new beginning in Linden Falls. I never expected to spend my summer in a town like Linden Falls. Originally, the plan was simple. Take a break from the noise of Philadelphia. Help my cousin Leah settle into her new teaching gig. And maybe use the downtime to clear my head after a rough breakup. I'd found the Airbnb listing late one night, eyes tired, phone dimmed, scrolling mindlessly for a place to get away. It was a last-minute deal. Historic countryside villa in secluded Linden Falls. Perfect for writers, artists, and those seeking peace. Asterisk asterisk. The photos showed a grand old farmhouse with weathered white siding, ivy creeping up the columns, and a deep wraparound porch. It had that southern charm, the kind that looks noble even in decay. Leah agreed it looked perfect. By the next afternoon, the place was booked for the full month. You had to zoom in 3 times on Google Earth just to even see Linden Falls. The town was buried deep in South Carolina, nestled between forgotten farm roads and endless pine groves. Our GPS gave up 5 miles from the house. From there, we had to follow the written directions emailed by the host. By the time we pulled into the gravel drive, the sun was just dipping behind the trees. Long shadows stretched across the porch, and a wave of cicadas filled the air like static. The house was even larger than the pictures let on. The paint was more faded up close, and one of the porch railings leaned like it had given up trying to stay upright. But it still stood with this quiet dignity, like it had seen 100 summers and wasn't in a rush to see another. "I love it," Leah said as she stepped out, shielding her eyes from the sunset. "It's like something out of a southern novel." I didn't say anything. I wasn't sure I loved it. But we were tired. And honestly, the idea of a hot shower and soft bed had me too beat to nitpick. Our host, Deborah, had left the key in a rusty lockbox beside the door. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar, and something else. A mustiness. Not unpleasant. Just old. Like the house had been holding its breath for a long time and had only just remembered how to exhale. The furniture was an odd mix. Antique wooden sideboards next to sleek IKEA nightstands. A grandfather clock that hadn't ticked in years stood in the hall beside a buttery leather sectional that was probably delivered last spring. The floor creaked with every step like it had stories to tell. Our rooms were upstairs. Mine faced the front, looking out over the gravel path and patchy lawn. Leah's looked into the woods behind the house. We unpacked in silence, each of us too road-weary to talk. Later, we sat in the living room with a bottle of red wine between us. The windows looked out into a blackness so complete it was like the world outside just stopped existing. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Deep. Dreamless. Total darkness. The next morning was slow, the kind of calm that makes you feel like time forgot to check in. Leah left around 9 to meet the school principal in town. I stayed behind, planning to read, maybe explore the property a bit. I poured a cup of coffee and stepped out onto the porch. The humidity was already thick. The kind that clings to your neck and makes your shirt stick by breakfast. And that's when I saw it for the first time. A rocking chair. The rocking chair sat tucked into the corner of the porch, an old thing with chipped white paint and slats worn soft from years of use. I was sure it hadn't been there the night before. I tried to brush it off, figured maybe I just hadn't noticed it in the dark. Still, the way it was positioned felt off. It faced the woods, but not in a natural way, not how someone would angle it to catch a breeze or a view. It was turned sharply, like someone had dragged it into that exact spot to watch something specific out in the trees. I didn't sit in it. I spent most of that day indoors. I FaceTimed a friend from back home, made a quick lunch, tidied up the kitchen just to stay busy. But the air inside the house had started to shift. Not in an obvious, scary way, just subtly wrong. Like the kind of wrong that settles into old bones and waits under floorboards. Leah came back that evening glowing. "Everyone at the school was so nice," she said. "They told me they haven't had a new teacher in years." She chuckled. "Apparently, people don't move to Linden Falls. They only leave." She meant it as a joke, but something about it made my skin crawl. I asked if anyone mentioned the house. "Just that it's old," she said. "Some woman named Estelle used to live here. She gave piano lessons in the living room. I think she passed away a while back." That night, the rocking chair had moved again. This time, it was facing the front door. And that night, I didn't sleep as well. I woke just after 2 in the morning. The glowing red digits on the bedside clock read 2:13, a time that would brand itself into my memory. The house was silent. Except for a sound. A faint, steady creaking. My heart was already hammering as I sat up. The chair. I crept to the window. From my room, I could see the corner of the porch, and there it was. The chair was rocking. Slow and steady, back and forth. The way someone might move if they were deep in thought or waiting for something. But no one was in it. I wanted to blame the wind. But the trees weren't swaying. Not even a breeze. The next morning, I asked Leah if she'd seen anything strange. She hesitated. Then nodded. "Actually, yeah. I woke up around 3. I thought I saw someone standing in the woods. Just standing there. When I blinked, they were gone. Probably just my imagination." We didn't say anything more. But after that, the house changed. The air got heavier, like it was pressing down on us. The lights flickered more. Doors we shut would be open again. I started hearing piano music at night, always the same broken melody. Halting. Out of rhythm. Like someone learning from memory. Leah heard it too. We stopped pretending we didn't. She started sleeping with her lamp on. I started locking my bedroom door. One afternoon, I found something while straightening a hallway rug. A floorboard was loose. Behind it, tucked into the wall, was an old black and white photo, faded at the edges. It showed 4 children seated at a piano. Behind them, a woman stood with a stern face. On the back, in thin handwriting, "Estelle's class, spring 1963. One of the children had a dark smudge over their face. Not ink. Not mold. Something else. Something that felt intentional. We left 3 days early. Packed everything up around midnight and didn't speak a word until we hit the highway. The house didn't feel like it wanted us there anymore. When we dropped the key back in the lockbox, the rocking chair was still again, facing the woods. Leah never mentioned Linden Falls after that. She quit the job before the school year started, told everyone she just didn't feel right staying. I never pushed for more. I still think about that place, though. About the chair. About the music. About how quiet it all was. I tell myself it was just an old house with creaky floors and a strange past. That we were tired. Imaginative. But deep down, I know better. Some places don't want to be left alone. And some echoes, they never stop. Another winter. Another door. Asterisk asterisk. I never used to believe in omens, not really. But that changed the weekend we went to Maine. It was January, late in the month, and I'd finally convinced Rachel to take a break. We were both worn down. She'd been grinding through 60-hour weeks at a pediatric clinic in Philadelphia, and I was barely keeping up with deadlines at a branding agency that never let off the gas. Our 10th anniversary was coming up, and we both felt the weight of that milestone more than we expected. We didn't want a fancy dinner. No weekend in the city. We wanted silence. Snow. Stillness. Something simple. Something that felt like it mattered. So we started looking for cabins. After hours of clicking through listings, Rachel found it. A brand new A-frame tucked beside a frozen lake in a town we'd never heard of. Elk Haven, Maine. The photos looked like they'd been pulled straight from a travel magazine. Pine trees draped in snow, a wide deck wrapping around the house, and massive floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the frozen water. The host was a man named Evan. He had just a handful of reviews, but every one of them glowing. We booked it for 3 nights. Friday through Monday. The second we clicked confirm, Rachel leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "This is going to be good for us." And back then I believed her. The drive from Philadelphia took just under 4 hours. We left early Friday morning to stay ahead of a storm creeping across the radar. Rachel made a playlist, soft, nostalgic stuff from when we first met. Norah Jones, Death Cab. Songs that made everything feel like the start of a movie. By the time we crossed into Maine, the highways had thinned to 2-lane roads, winding past bare trees and snow-covered farmland. Rachel pointed out horses standing still in frosted fields and played a game where she guessed what every rundown barn used to be. With every mile that passed on that snow-covered road, it felt like we were leaving the chaos of real life behind. The stress, the noise, the grind, it all seemed to fade the deeper we drove into the woods. Just before 1 in the afternoon, we finally pulled into the property. The GPS had taken us down a narrow dirt road lined with towering pines. It twisted and dipped through the trees before spilling out into a wide clearing. And there it was. The cabin. Even more striking in person than in the photos. A tall, sharp A-frame with deep black siding and wide triangular windows that mirrored the frozen lake behind it. Everything was wrapped in a blanket of white, pure, undisturbed snow that looked like it had never been touched. We parked in a small gravel patch near the base of the hill, then followed a path that had been shoveled clean, cutting a narrow trail up to the front door. When I opened it, the door gave a soft creak. Not eerie, just old wood talking. Like the place hadn't been disturbed in a while. Inside, it was warm. Inviting. The air carried the faint scent of cedar, maybe a hint of eucalyptus or dried sage. Something herbal that settled into your lungs like peace. Rachel headed straight for the fireplace, kneeling down to check the kindling stacked neatly in the hearth. I wandered into the kitchen, where I found a handwritten note sitting beside a mason jar of homemade cocoa mix. *Welcome, Tyler and Rachel. I hope this weekend brings you peace and quiet. The landline works for emergencies. No cell service out here, but that's part of the charm. Let the mountains hold you. Evan, *. Rachel peeked over my shoulder and chuckled. Let the mountains hold you. That's either poetic or mildly culty. I grinned and slipped an arm around her waist. I'm voting poetic. She leaned into me. We deserve a weekend like this. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she looked like herself again. Relaxed. Present. That first night was everything we hoped for. We cooked a simple pasta dinner, opened a bottle of wine, and played cards at the wooden dining table while the fire crackled behind us. Outside, snow fell again, blanketing the windows in soft white. The wind moved through the trees in long, hollow breaths. At one point, Rachel curled up beside me on the couch, head resting on my lap, her eyes searching my face. You ever wonder if we've changed too much? She asked softly. I brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek. What do you mean? I don't know. We used to stay up talking about dreams. Now it's bills and schedules. Deadlines. Clients. It's like we lost something. I paused. Maybe that's why we're here. To remember what that felt like. She smiled with her eyes closed. I want to remember. I really do. And I meant it when I whispered, me too. We slept that night in the loft beneath thick quilts that smelled faintly of lavender. The king-size bed was soft and quiet. Outside, the wind picked up. The lake groaned beneath the ice, deep and low, like something ancient shifting in its sleep. We didn't mind. It felt like part of the experience. The next morning, Rachel was up before me. I found her out on the back deck, wrapped in a blanket, a chipped white mug of coffee in her hands. She was staring across the lake. "It's frozen solid," she said as I stepped outside beside her. I checked. "Looks like it's at least 3 inches thick. You thinking of walking on it?" She shrugged. "Maybe. Just to say I did." I smiled, but something about the idea made me uneasy. The lake felt too still, too wide, like it was hiding something beneath all that silence. After breakfast, we took a trip into town. Elfhaven was small, maybe 1,000 people, give or take. One main street, a few antique shops, a general store. We stopped at a place called Maple and Birch, a cozy bakery with old wood floors and cinnamon in the air. We ordered maple lattes and split a warm cinnamon roll. The woman behind the counter looked to be in her 60s. Long gray braids, kind but watchful eyes, and an accent I couldn't place. "You folks staying up near Frost Valley?" she asked as she rang us up. Rachel nodded. "Cabin by the lake? Airbnb." The woman smiled politely, but I saw it. Something in her expression shifted. Not fear. Not even concern. Just hesitation. Like she was deciding what not to say. "Beautiful property," she said at last. "Just keep your firewood dry. Weather's turning tonight." We thanked her and headed out. Back in the car, Rachel turned to me. "Did you catch that? The way she said it?" I replied. "Yeah." She looked at us like we were idiots for staying there. "Maybe she's just seen one too many Maine winters," I said, trying to brush it off. By late afternoon, the snow was coming down hard. We stayed in, curled up on the couch watching a movie on Rachel's laptop. We made a big dinner, roasted veggies and baked chicken, and around 8 the power flickered once, then steadied. Nothing unusual. Just weather. But then, something odd. I went into the kitchen to grab another bottle of wine, and noticed one of the cabinets was slightly open. Just a couple of inches, like it hadn't been fully closed. I was almost certain it had been shut earlier. Not a big deal. But something about it stuck with me. I pushed it closed and went back to the living room. "Everything okay?" Rachel asked, stretching. "Yeah," I said. "Thought I left a cabinet open. Might be losing it." She didn't press it, and I didn't bring it up again. We fell asleep on the couch, the fire burning low, our bodies warm and full. At 2:17 a.m., we both shot awake. A loud, solid thud echoed from upstairs, from the loft. I sat up, heart thudding. Rachel grabbed my arm. "You heard that?" she whispered. I did. We stayed frozen, listening. Then came a second sound. Softer. A slow creaking, like someone shifting their weight on the floorboards above. "Maybe the wind," I offered, not even believing myself. We both knew it wasn't the wind. I grabbed the flashlight from the drawer beside the fireplace and headed for the stairs, each step creaking under my weight like it had a voice of its own. Rachel stayed behind on the couch, silent but alert. At the top of the staircase, the loft was still. Nothing moved. Nothing out of place. But as I turned to head back down, something caught my eye. The closet door. Just slightly open. Not wide, just a few inches, but enough to make my stomach turn. It had been closed when we went to bed. I was sure of it. I stood there a second too long, light trembling slightly in my hand. Something had changed. Something had shifted. "Another story begins," whispering Glenn. I never thought I'd actually take a real vacation. For the past 7 years, life had been nothing but deadlines, late nights, and stress disguised as ambition. I ran a growing digital consultancy out of Minneapolis, and while the business thrived, I quietly came undone. My therapist had warned me more than once. "You're burning the candle at both ends, Aiden. You're not just tired. You're unraveling." Maya, my wife, was less diplomatic. "You're either taking a break, or I'm taking one without you." She wasn't bluffing. She'd stood by me through the chaos, but even she had limits. So, with a little pressure from both corners of my life, I gave in. I cleared the week, turned on the auto-reply, and told myself this time, I'd actually rest. No resorts. No tourist towns. Just space. Quiet. Privacy. Maya had found a listing on a lesser-known website that catered to rural getaways. It wasn't technically Airbnb, but it worked the same way: verified hosts, guest reviews, direct messaging. She showed me the listing one night after dinner. It was a modern 2-story home nestled in the woods just outside a town called Whispering Glen. 4 hours from the city. 2 floors, big windows, a private hot tub, and a backyard that stretched into the forest. Photos showed warm, polished hardwood floors and sun filtering through the trees. The host, Marlene Quinn, lived downstairs with her husband, Raymond. She assured us the layout was built for privacy. Different entrances, no shared interior space. Just the driveway. It was a bit pricier than other options, $125 a night, but Maya was already sold. And I didn't have the energy to argue. I just needed sleep. We booked it for 5 nights. The drive out was uneventful, flat highways slowly giving way to tight, winding backroads flanked by tall trees and sloping land. The city fell behind us like a dream fading on the horizon. Maya drove. I dozed in and out, the kind of half-sleep where your body rests, but your mind keeps spinning. Whispering Glen was tiny. A grocery store, a single gas station, and a diner that looked unchanged since the 1970s. We stopped briefly for snacks, then followed Marlene's emailed directions up a gravel road that coiled deep into the trees. When we saw the house, it was exactly as described. Tucked into a rise between tall pines and red maples, painted a soft slate gray that blended with the winter sky. Sunlight poured through wide windows, reflecting off fresh leaves. It was beautiful. Marlene greeted us at the top of the steps. She was in her 50s, maybe older, with a long cardigan despite the mild afternoon. Her smile was thin, polite. Her voice gentle, but her eyes stayed sharp, like she was watching more than listening. Raymond said nothing. Just a nod and a handshake before walking off toward the back of the property. Marlene led us upstairs and walked us through the space. The house was spotless. Linens folded, pantry stocked, fresh fruit in a bowl, even a basket of snacks on the counter. "We're just downstairs if you need anything," she said as we unpacked. "But we keep to ourselves." Maya smiled. "That's exactly what we were hoping for." Marlene paused before turning to leave. "One more thing," she said over her shoulder. "The woods carry sound at night. Don't be alarmed if you hear anything unusual. It's just wildlife. Always is." Then she disappeared down the stairs. That first evening was a kind of quiet I hadn't felt in years. Maya lit a few candles while I unpacked. The sun dipped low, casting the woods in a golden amber glow. For the first time in months I felt still. Dinner was simple: grilled cheese, tomato soup, and a bottle of red. We ate on the back deck, listening to the trees whisper in the wind. No buzzing phones. No inbox. Just the two of us and the quiet hum of cicadas as dusk rolled in. Later, Maya curled up on the couch with a novel while I wandered the house. It was cozy, clean, minimalist. Framed prints of pine branches and foggy hills hung neatly on the walls. The bookshelves were full of travel memoirs, local guides, and a few beat-up paperbacks. One title caught my eye: The Forgotten Woods of Whispering Glen. It looked self-published, thin, stapled binding, matte cover. Almost like a pamphlet more than a real book. I flipped through it out of curiosity. Halfway in, I paused at a passage. It is said the land beyond Raven Path Road was once considered sacred by a now-vanished tribe. Offerings were left near the old stones. And when the offerings stopped, the woods began to whisper. Locals still report strange sounds. The book read, chanting voices, sometimes lights drifting through the trees. Most chalk it up to old stories. Still, no one around here goes into those woods after dark. I let out a dry chuckle, muttering, "Campfire nonsense," and slid the booklet back onto the shelf. That night, sleep came easier than I expected. Maybe it was the wine, or maybe it was the way the forest wrapped itself around the house like a heavy blanket. Maya fell asleep first, breathing slow and even beside me. I lay there for a while, listening. The silence was different here, deeper than anything I'd ever felt in the city. Not just the absence of noise. It was a silence that had weight. Presence. Then I heard it. A sound barely there. A faint dragging noise, like something being pulled across the forest floor. My whole body went still. I sat up, pulse picking up speed. There it was again. Closer now. It wasn't in the house. It was outside, just behind the wall near the bed, on the other side of the wood. Leaves shifting, something moving with slow, uneven steps. A deer, I told myself. Maybe a fox. Raccoon even. But no. The rhythm was wrong. It wasn't the quick darting steps of an animal. It was slower. More deliberate. Like someone walking with one leg heavier than the other. I got up, crept toward the window, and peeled the curtain back just an inch. Nothing. Just trees, standing still in the breathless night. No wind. No movement. No figure. Just that awful stillness. The morning came with golden light pouring through the trees and the smell of coffee rising from the kitchen. Maya was already on the deck smiling, barefoot, wrapped in a fleece throw. I didn't tell her about the sound. Maybe I dreamt it. Or maybe I was just on edge. Maya had plans, sunlight in her eyes and nowhere to be. A forest walk. A little sunbathing. Maybe the hot tub under the stars. She was glowing, and I didn't want to weigh her down with something I couldn't even explain. We hiked a narrow trail behind the house that cut through the woods, looping down to a shallow creek bed. The stream had dried up, its stones bare and cold. Maya stopped every few steps to photograph clusters of mushrooms and weird little spirals of moss. I tried to shake the unease crawling through my chest. There was something wrong with the woods. Not dangerous. Just hollow. Like the space between trees was too wide, and the air was stretched thin. It felt like a place sound couldn't settle in. Then Maya turned to me. "Do you hear that?" I blinked. "What?" "Exactly," she said. "Nothing." She was right. No birds. No wind. No rustling leaves. Just a thick, unnatural quiet. We stood there for a few seconds, wrapped in that silence, before she shook it off and kept walking. But I couldn't forget it. That evening, I ran into Raymond. I had gone out to grab firewood from the shed when I saw him at the bottom of the exterior stairs, leaning against the railing with a hand-rolled cigarette between his fingers. "Evening," he rasped. His voice sounded like stone dragged across metal. "Evening." I nodded, not in the mood for small talk. "You two settling in all right?" "Yeah," I said. "It's beautiful out here. Quiet." He gave a single nod. "Real quiet. House don't like noise." I frowned. "Sorry, what?" He looked up at me, his eyes sharp under the porch light. "Just saying, some places are built different. They hold on to things. Soak 'em in." Before I could reply, he flicked his cigarette into a dented coffee can and disappeared down the steps, boots echoing against the wood. I didn't tell Maya. Later that night, she suggested we try the hot tub. We poured drinks, slipped into our swimsuits, and eased into the steaming water just after 9. The cold night met the rising steam in soft clouds, and for a while, it was everything we needed. But then the pool lights flickered, once. Then again. And then, they went out completely. "Did you touch anything?" Maya asked, suddenly tense. "Nope. Probably just the breaker." But the house lights were still on. I climbed out, towel wrapped around my shoulders, and walked behind the shed to check the switch box. It was untouched. I flipped the breaker anyway. The lights clicked back on, humming faintly beneath the water. When I returned, Maya was frozen, staring out into the dark woods beyond the fence. "There was someone there," she whispered. "Between those two trees. Just now." I followed her gaze. "You're sure?" She nodded. Tall. Still. Just watching. I grabbed the flashlight and swept it across the trees. The beam moved across trunks and branches, but there was nothing. No movement. No shadow. Still, we went inside. I double-locked the door and drew the curtains. We went to bed, but I didn't sleep. Around midnight I heard humming. Not music from Maya's phone. Not a tune I recognized. A soft voice, female, humming something slow and broken, like a lullaby someone couldn't quite remember. It was coming from near the stairs. I got out of bed, crept into the hallway, and listened. The house was dark, the hum just barely audible, weaving its way through the silence. Then 3 knocks. Slow. Even. Deliberate. Knock. 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 At our door. I stepped forward. My voice caught in my throat. Marlene? No answer. I opened the door. No one. Just silence. But then, just as I was about to close it, I heard footsteps. Descending the staircase. Slow and steady. And in the space between sounds, in that last moment before the quiet swallowed everything again, I heard it. A voice. Low. Just above a whisper. Calling my name.